Mike, the secular nature of the Constitution means that it would not be accurate to describe the United States as a Christian nation. I think Justin gets at this when he says to have an intellectually honest conversation, you can't talk about that. You could say it's a nation that was populated by a preponderance of Christians, but when people look back on the Constitution, they remark at how shockingly secular it is. And in fact, that comes at a very low ebb of American religiosity in our history. A lot of people don't realize, they seem to think, kind of like what you're talking about, Justin, that there used to be this thing that we can get back to, and it's just sort of been backsliding since then, but it's simply not true if you're intellectually honest about American history. We do know, of course, though, that Christianity did profoundly shape the United States, and it's not like all of these ideas emerged from some imagined secular neutrality. That is certainly not the case either. So how does the United States, Mike, maintain its commitments to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness if most citizens don't share or at least acknowledge Christian presuppositions? I know that's a complicated question, but it's really trying to get to the essence of how do we bring the best of Christianity to bear on a nation that is in many ways turning back on the Christianity that did infuse this country with the principles that Justin's saying we could reclaim, that Abraham Lincoln reclaimed, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reclaimed in their efforts to renew the American project.
Right. Renewing the American project is wonderful if it's not piggybacking on a pseudo-Christian narrative. That's right. Our story. Brothers and sisters around the world of every ethnicity and background. That's our family story. It can't be grafted onto the American story. And that's because, there was a time when the church was a nation, a geopolitical nation, Israel. And in Exodus 19, he says, if you obey me, you will be a chosen nation, a royal priesthood, and so forth. Because the Sinai covenant, unlike the Abrahamic covenant, was conditional. As long as Israel obeyed, it could remain in God's land. It didn't obey, was kicked out of the land, exiled, and that covenant is obsolete, the New Testament says. That covenant is obsolete. So it's interesting, like theological liberals do this, right? Interpret the Bible allegorically to say what they want to say because they don't like what the historical narratives actually say. That's what we're doing. And that's what's happening even in conservative circles. If we forget, 1 Peter 2:9 uses that very description of Israel for the church, and no ifs, ands, or buts. You are a chosen nation, a royal priesthood, a people for God's own possession. And then just historically, you're absolutely right. With it not being in a treaty with Tripoli, George Washington said, since the United States is in no sense a Christian nation, religion will not interfere in our relationship with you. Talking to a religious state, saying we're not a religious state. But it never would have occurred to Washington that it's not one nation under God. And I think that's the thing that many were deists. I mean, you have from Thomas Paine, who was an atheist, all the way to Patrick Henry, and James Madison, who wrote the Constitution. If you read the Federalist Papers, he got most of his theology from John Witherspoon at Princeton College. Witherspoon, a Scottish Presbyterian minister. And so he talks about the two kingdoms. For instance, he disagrees with Patrick Henry, who wants to have tax exemption for churches and Christian schools. Why on earth would he do that? It's just secularist, atheist? No. He said, in light of the doctrine of the two kingdoms, Christ's kingdom and the kingdoms of this world, Christ's kingdom is more important. What right does the state have to determine what a true church is? And so, I mean, it's really remarkable how much the secularity of the Constitution is due to Baptists who fought for liberty, Presbyterians who fought for liberty, Lutherans who came over and fought for liberty against state churches. It was evangelicals who pioneered that. And the Reformation met the Enlightenment, and they both kissed and embraced. This is not just a Reformation narrative or an Enlightenment narrative. Jefferson was probably an atheist, as John Adams accused him of being, even though John Adams himself didn't believe in the Trinity or the deity of Christ. It was a mixed bag, just like it is today. So we've got to change our understanding both of the biblical exegesis underlying Christian nationalism and the bad history that you get from both sides these days. The other side, just writes out any Christian influence unless it's bad.
Just think about all that we have to try to untangle with George Washington himself. And the example that you gave there, the reason this is so complicated, and if you came expecting the Gospelbound podcast, you were going to get a lot of easy answers. That's not really the brand. But if you think about Washington, you're dealing with somebody who not only does not occur to him that the United States is a Christian nation, at the same time, it could not have occurred to him that Christianity was not a pervasive influence in the nation, and at the same time, not so pervasive that it would have made him question slavery, or to confront that. Look at all that we have to untangle. You can honor Washington all you want, and I certainly don't have a problem with that, but look at the legacy that you have to untangle there.